In its 9 seasons on air, the office of Dunder Mifflin was run by 11 different regional managers.
Everybody, David Wallace and I have talked, and we have decided to promote Jim to the position of co-manager.
Some had their jobs for years, others for less than an hour. But the office never ran better in the rare times when there was no manager at all.
Unleash the power of the pyramid.
I get that this is just a comedy, but sometimes what makes this show so funny is how close to reality it gets at times. If a company is set up properly, people really can just come into work, do their job, and go home without layers of authority on top of them micromanaging their every move, getting in the way of actual business operations, and taking home the biggest salaries in the office. Bad management can ruin even the best ideas and end up costing their companies lots of money in the process.
It's true.
About $3 trillion a year according to recent studies, which is why some companies are starting to rethink if the hierarchical business structure is a thing of the past. A typical business management is responsible for choosing the direction of the company.
I declare bankruptcy!
Training their subordinates and providing them with the tools they need to move the company in that direction, rewarding employees if they excel in their work, and punishing employees that don't meet their standards. These 5 tasks encompass everything that a manager is responsible for, and they are all very important roles in running a successful business, so it's not like the role of a manager is redundant by default. But some companies are starting to realize that these 5 tasks can be done without a manager at all, often with better results. This isn't some socialist propaganda either. These are regular businesses trying to operate in the best way to maximize profits for their shareholders. Some of the organizations we will look at in this video are owned by billionaires who would not benefit at all from the rich being eaten. So it's time to learn how money works to find out if the companies of the future could be run without the managers from the past. This week's lesson was brought to you by Vessi. If you haven't heard of the brand Vessi, let me tell you why I've really started to love their sneakers. Vessi creates 100% waterproof sneakers that are great for the most unpredictable weather. During my free time, I love spending my time doing outdoor activities, visiting the Palace of Fine Arts or Crissy Field Beach in San Francisco. The problem is that my shoes get dirty and wet when visiting these places. That is, until I got my Vessi shoes, which are perfect for the outdoors. They are made from Dymatex, a dual climate knit material that keeps you cool in the summer and warm in the colder weather, and they don't feel like they should be waterproof. You know that fear when water covers your shoes and you know you're gonna have damp socks for the rest of the day? Well, you don't have to worry about that with Vessi sneakers.
Wow.
Best of all, they are comfortable, lightweight, and breathable. And unlike waterproof shoes, they are good looking. They've become my regular go-to shoe because I can wear them just about anywhere and with any outfit. Get a pair for yourself and click the link in the description and use code HMW for $25 off each pair of adult Vessi shoes. To get rid of hierarchical management structures that have been used by organizations for centuries, a company would need to see that a managerless organization is possible and advantageous for shareholders. You not liking your boss is unfortunately not a good enough reason to change how a company operates, and a few of the managerless companies we will look at later are famous for being pretty terrible places to work anyway, so worker satisfaction is not going on the list. Apart from that, there are 4 big advantages to getting rid of managers that shareholders will actually care about. Number 1, it saves money. Businesses should always be trying to cut down on unnecessary expenses, and managers are typically paid more than the workers they are managing. If they can be removed, then that leaves more money to be paid back to the shareholders. This is the obvious one, but less companies think to do this than you might imagine. A 2016 report by the Harvard Business Review found that excess management was costing the states $3 trillion per year. That's like removing the state of California and Texas and making them micromanage each other. But why would profit-driven companies do this? Well, managers are normally the first people consulted about incoming layoffs, and they are also the people tasked with deciding who leaves and who stays. They are obviously not going to pick themselves, even if they are the person in their team that contributes the least. As you go higher up the corporate ladder, it becomes worse because managers start to look out for people directly below them. The anthropologist David Graeber spoke about this in his book Bullshit Jobs, where he singled out people that only exist in organizations to make their superiors feel important.
So how on earth do you have a situation where private firms are making up jobs where they pay people not to do anything? Now that's exactly the last thing you'd think that a competitive firm would do.
Graeber specifically spoke about receptionists, administrative assistants, and doormen, but middle managers can become flunkies of their own. A senior manager delegates to middle managers, who delegate to team leaders, who delegate to staff. If this chain of command doesn't exist, then the senior managers will just be regular managers, and that simply can't be allowed to happen. One of the first things that most private equity companies do after they take over a business is strip out a lot of management, and it's rare to say that this has any downside effects on the company. Number 2, it removes single points of failure. Managers will either knowingly or unknowingly make themselves needless keyholders in a business. If you work in an office, think of how many tasks you have done a million times before, but still need a manager's sign-off every time. Technology has only made this worse, as now operations on company systems are tied to managers' login details. Sometimes staff shouldn't be allowed to do certain things, and we are not talking about making the company payroll account open to all employees, but that doesn't involve management anyway. I used to work at an investment bank, and I am not allowed to say too much about what I did there. But a big part of my job was making SIPs, or confidential information presentations, which are fancy documents to send to potential buyers, which are packed full of information they need to know about a company they are considering buying. I made countless SIPs in my career, but every time I needed to print, I needed my MD to sign off on it, even if it was a draft. Even if it would never be looked at by anybody external from the business. I am sure you have all had very similar experiences before. If managers are ever asked about what they do around the office, a common responsibility they are unironically proud of is signing off on things. Hierarchical management also creates single points of failure if someone is incompetent or corrupt.
The corporate hierarchy is just an extension of the human need for status and authority.
Advantage number 3, it helps workers stay on task. This one might sound a bit counterintuitive, but let me explain. The job of a good manager is pretty easy, and unless they themselves or their manager gives them lots of meaningless tasks to do, it's very hard to fill up a 40-hour work week with tasks that could be classified as managing. The average manager is responsible for 4.7 subordinates. If a manager was directly managing all equally, that would mean more than 8 hours per week per worker, which is time taken away from their tasks. So either these managers are wasting their subordinates' time, or they are finding ways to fill their own to make themselves look busy. Some managers mix up their time by actually engaging in the same work as their team. This can be an effective form of leadership, but sometimes it can just cause problems if the manager is just a manager and doesn't have the skills needed to do the job they oversee. Graeber talks about the taskmaster. Taskmasters come in 2 distinct varieties: the ones who tell their underlings what to do, and the ones who actively invent pointless tasks just to make sure they can say they have contributed something. The first variety is only pointless if employees in a company would not stay on task without active supervision. In the age of quiet quitting, that may make you think that these managers are essential, but there are other ways to keep people on task that doesn't involve paying people to stand over others with a stopwatch. The second variety, the ones that make up pointless tasks, can be very damaging to a company. How much time do you waste at your job going through appraisals, reviews, assessments, and meetings that could have been in an email, also that your manager has something to put in their calendar? That's time that you are not spending making shareholders money. Advantage number 4, it reduces staff turnover. According to a recent study conducted by Dr. Brian Robinson, the top reason for people leaving their job was poor pay, with 59% of respondents citing this as the reason they resigned. But just behind that, 56% said that poor management was what made them quit. People rarely quit jobs. They quit managers, which is not surprising when you find out that most managers do not receive any formal management training, and most only got their jobs because they were good at non-management roles they had before. Being good at sales, programming, or any other operational job is an entirely different skill set from being a good manager. Sometimes companies get lucky, but not always. The Dilbert principle is the trend for people who are good at their jobs to be promoted until they get to a job that they are no longer good at. I know I have used this example before, but Michael Scott is the best portrayal of this principle ever put to screen. He demonstrated that he was a fantastic salesman that made a lot of money for his company, so he became the logical choice to run the branch when his boss Ed Truck retired. He was not suited to management and ended up causing all the management problems on our list. He would waste people's time, he would cause great damage to the business, and he would do all this while taking home the largest paycheck in the office.
Welcome, 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 welcome. You are all jerks.
Because he was so terrible at his job, he was never going to be promoted again. But the company also believed he had earned his job, so he also continued to barely avoid getting fired. So his poor employees were stuck with him. And this exact situation is far from a work fiction in offices all around the world.
You are the reason I drink. You are the reason I live to forget.
The only reason Michael did not cause more staff turnover was because this was a TV show that needed a consistent cast. In the real world, if people get stuck with a terrible manager who is never going to leave their position, then they quit their job because it's the only escape. Hierarchical management structures also cause staff turnover for a different reason too. Ambitious workers who want to climb the corporate ladder will quickly learn that switching jobs is the fastest way to get a promotion. This is a great strategy for the worker, but it's terrible for the companies because they need to invest money into hiring and training an employee only for them to deliver 2 years worth of service and move on. If a company had no defined hierarchy of management, then workers wouldn't feel as if their career had stagnated because they were passed over for a promotion. Promotions themselves wouldn't exist, so there wouldn't be that motivation to move on. But don't take my word for it. Let's look at some real-world examples of businesses that have made a managerless structure work. You probably think I'm about to start talking about worker co-ops now, and they are a great example. Worker co-ops employ around 20% of the entire world's workforce and are often incredibly successful operations for their owners, who are also the employees. These are often businesses in cottage industries which have a reputation for being a bit alternative, selling organic, tofu-coated, solar power, throw rugs out of their community centers. But these are not the businesses I want to talk about. Instead, I want to start with Renaissance Technologies, which is a hedge fund. Precisely the last business you would expect to do away with rigid management structures.
This is probably the single most successful hedge fund in the history of the industry in terms of its performance record.
Renaissance, and particularly the Medallion Fund, is the most successful hedge fund in history. It delivered an annualized return of 39% after fees between 1988 and 2018. That is 4 times the market return, which is already very good. Just $1,000 invested into this fund at the beginning of that period would be worth $100 million today. The Medallion Fund achieved these returns by employing the world's smartest statisticians, mathematicians, and computer scientists to build computer models to predict the stock market before computer modeling was even possible. Nobody outside the firm knows quite what they get up to these days, and that's exactly how they like it. Renaissance cut off outside investors from their Medallion Fund in the early 90s, and now the business only invests the money of the people that work at the company. The people they hire also get access to all the company's price data and computer models, so they need to make sure that the people stay around, or else their market-beating formulas would eventually leak out to other investors, which would render them useless. The company was able to attract such amazing talent and keep them around long-term because it's effectively run as a workers' co-op. The fund is run for the benefit of the members, who are the employees, and nobody is above anybody else when it comes to official authority. There are people that work at this fund that are more experienced, more respected, and are paid more than others. But their ideas are all treated equally, and nobody can say that something will or will not be done because they are the boss. If you Google Renaissance, you will notice that it still has a management structure and a CEO. But those individuals are mostly there for compliance reasons and to perform certain roles that must be given an official title in an investment firm. The CEO and the first-year analysts all get the same decision-making authority when it comes to how the fund deploys its capital. If the role of a manager is to choose the direction of a company, train their subordinates, and provide them with the tools they need to move the company in that direction, reward employees that excel in their work, and punish employees that don't meet their standards, it's worth seeing how the most successful hedge fund in history completed these tasks without managers. When it comes to training, Renaissance had a very particular philosophy. You can teach someone a job, but you can't teach someone to be smart. The company would often hire people like astrophysicists and world-class chess players and teach them about trading on Wall Street. This training was done collaboratively, and the company took the same approach to developing trading algorithms as scientists would take when working on an experiment. They would draw different expertise from different people, and everybody would slowly learn how they all fit together. Of course, it probably helped that most of the people that worked there actually were scientists. In our own offices, I am sure most of you have learned more about your job from your peers than you have through management-run exercises or seminars. Rewarding high-performing employees and punishing underperformers is something that Renaissance doesn't talk too openly about. The kinds of people that qualify for a job at Renaissance are always going to be brilliant in their field and extremely driven to solve problems. But people still do get fired. It's normally because the employees have collectively forced them out. But working without a manager can be a huge motivator. Letting down the boss is not nearly as bad to most people as letting down a group of their peers. I know I have put more dedication into training for a soccer final than I have into preparing pitch decks, even though soccer is something I do just for fun, and pitch decks used to be how I avoided homelessness. The fear of letting down your team is more powerful than the fear of being fired. Choosing company direction was also a joint effort. An investment fund has a pretty clear goal: make as much money as possible. But employees all decided on what strategies the company would use, what markets they would trade in, and even what investors they would bring on board. You might think that this would make Renaissance a great place to work, but most accounts say the exact opposite. The strong personalities of people who are the best in their fields all working together for long hours in a high-stress industry can cause countless arguments. But even despite that, the company has had staff turnover measured in decades and still managed to be the most successful investment fund of all time. And if that's not a ringing endorsement for the redundancy of dedicated managers, then nothing will be. But maybe we as humans just can't do away with social hierarchies. After all, we only ever learn about the rulers throughout history, which begs the questions: why do historians only care about rich people? Fortunately, I have answered this question over on my new channel, How History Works. And a special thank you again to Vessi for making it possible for everybody to keep on learning how money works.
People say I am the best boss. They go, God, we've never worked in a place like this before. You're hilarious. And you get the best out of us. I think that pretty much sums it up.